So everyone's recovered from lunch, I guess. We've all had a little bit of time. So this should be an interesting conversation. We're talking about company culture and then how to translate that into our lived realities. We've got a great panel, and I'm gonna just leave it to Geneva to kick off the introductions.
Hi, my name is Geneva Brown, and I'm the Vice President for Corporate Impact at the Cigna Group. And I'm also the Chief Inclusion and Sustainability Officer for the company. And as we start to think about the topic for our panel today, if I could share one way in which I live our values every day is I guess my life mantra is lift as I climb. So I'm always very thoughtful about how I can ensure that with every change, move, decision that I make, I'm always creating space for someone on my team or in my community that could also be able to make the transition with me.
Hello everyone, Omar Pradin. I work as a consultant at WorkHuman, and my role is to support the sales organization and speak to the impact of recognition at scale and how it ties to culture. And something that I do every day as it relates to culture is I start my day by looking at our platform, and I look at our culture hub, and I think about all the ways that it's coming alive and ways that I can participate and further our own culture at WorkHuman.
My name is Angie Parsons. I'm Director of Product Marketing for a technology company called Beekeeper by Lumaps. And for me, really, it's all about putting myself in the position of those that we either serve or those who have shared experiences within our own organization. So it's not just me and my point of view, but how I feel like values are really lived are by understanding, having empathy with others.
Good afternoon, everyone. Martel Neville, and I'm with a little unknown company called Comcast, and Vice President of Human Resources. And I'll tell you, I like to keep things very simple. So I always say, let's just remember the golden rule, which is treat others as you want to be treated.
The golden rule. So now that we've heard a bit about how our panelists live their company values every day, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the insights that they're bringing to it. And Geneva, I'm going to start with you. So you've talked about the importance of listening to employees, and that's a way to shape corporate culture. Can you speak to kind of how do you do that on a daily basis?
Absolutely. I think part of it's really important for all of us to do is to pause and listen. I think very often we want to act, we want to fix things, we want to be helpful, and sometimes we can take action before we fully understand what someone wants or needs. And sometimes what they want or need is to be validated, right? Like you may not have solutions to every issue, especially in a dynamic environment like the one that we're in. But that ability to pause and listen is critically important because at least you can bring that human element to all of your HR work. Some specific ways in which I do that, like first is I actually have time in my calendar, a calendar block, just to reach out to people, or if they reach out to me and need something, I reserve an hour every day. And that has been like revolutionary in my ability to create feedback loops. The other thing, that I do is I make sure, right, like that I follow up with people who say, can I tell you something or that one thing, right? And I sort of like kept notes in my phone, like a checklist. Did you talk to this person? To create space and know that it's safe to share. And I will even say, I can't fix this right away. I will think, though, if there's anything that I could do to be helpful, and I will make a note to follow up, whether it's 2 weeks later or a month, but give someone the feeling that they're heard.
Wow, yeah, that is some good workflow kind of lessons with the scheduling. I like that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Martel, Comcast is a huge company. Any thoughts on how you are able to kind of listen across the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of you in this room probably have employee surveys. We obviously have annual ones. We also have them quarterly as well. But then there's also other feedback loops that we employ in as well, whether it's just informally on teams. We always want to make sure that there's an open door concept and policy. People are always approachable, including myself. I always encourage people to schedule time with me as well. And to your point, Geneva, I also have time scheduled as well. I call it focus time. Again, trying to follow it with folks. But the other thing too, I just want to say, and I think Geneva, you're kind of mentioning this as well, is that we always have to remember there's one basic foundation to just showing respect, and that's listening to one another. And that goes a long way. Sometimes people don't want you to give them a solution. They just want to know that you're there and that you're listening.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of listening, Angie, many companies, when you're working across streams, there's a disconnect between the frontline workers and leadership. How do you keep communication moving back and forth with that feedback loop?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, there's a direct line correlation between communications gaps and cultural gaps. So if, for example, you have leadership mandating certain things or, sharing even the values, things that are supposed to be positive, but they're not receiving the same information kind of from the foundational level or the individual contributors or the frontline workers. They're not getting the same communication streams that other parts of the business are getting, for example, at a corporate office, then you're already creating a lot of disconnect. And so, you can definitely leverage solutions, whether they're, more manual-based or technology-based for pulse surveys, anonymous surveys, recognition, things like that. But having kind of more that programmatic way to be able to listen, as well as the more human element ways of listening, whether it's one-on-one and checkpoints, not just once a year during the performance review timeframe, but having it more either proactively doing that day to day in the flow of work, I think is a really great way to capture that the sentiment that's happening within the organization from both sides, the top down and the bottom up, to bring that connection.
And is there specific technology that you use to enable that dialogue?
Yeah, I think right now we're living in that revolutionary era where technology is really advancing in a way that brings together platforms. So everything from being able to chat with your peers, receive that communication in one single place, kind of an employee experience hub, is a great way to, being able to systematically and programmatically share all the resources with no matter where they are in the organization. In some cases, if you might have multiple locations, multiple shifts, especially with frontline workforce, you need to be able to have that inclusion and the fairness to be able to give them that information that they need to be able to feel connected to the business.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that, Omar?
Yeah, I think for the work that I do in sales, supporting sales as a consultant, we definitely do a lot of conversations before calls. We debrief after calls. It's those feedback loops. It's the listening. It's the understanding. How can we get better? We're a team shop, so all of those kind of notes and details and learnings get tracked there. And what's great about it is you can see those moments and how they progress over time. And then in our world, we like to reinforce. Positive reinforcement is always a good thing. So recognition can be a part of that. Not only are you listening to understand, but as you make progress, you can reinforce through recognition.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So beyond listening, are there strategies that you've seen that kind of take the conversation and move it into a level of action or changed behavior?
Yeah, I can share. So in addition to listening, which is sort of coupled with the surveys that we do, which already give us feedback, we also have team huddles. And we insist that every leader has a team huddle to review the feedback that's been given in surveys and to get more clarity on those things. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we try to champion everyone around is that we're here as leaders to listen, to learn, and to act. And so to your point is, what are the actions we're taking forward? We also encourage our employees to do a lot of elevations for customer improvement, and we also call them escalations for internal things when it comes to employees. And it's how do we submit these things through a system that is being tracked, and people can actually literally click it to watch it, to see it go to progress inside the organization.
Oh, wow. And then you also mentioned in our call that you do a lot of recognition of kind of these learnings. Can you describe how that works?
Yeah, so when we commit to a goal, set a priority, oftentimes it's through the lens of the culture. What does it mean at one company versus another to be able to reinforce the how behind getting work done. So every company's different. They all have their own core values that are unique and somewhat different. And so recognition can be a way to anchor the behaviors that were observed and the impact that was demonstrated and the skills and the full story of what was accomplished. And so that's a way to memorialize. And then when it becomes part of a system of record for a company at scale, you can start to use really cool tools around that, dashboards to see how certain topics are surfacing. Maybe you have strategic priorities that you want to see play out across the business. You can set that vision at the top, but then you can come and look to see how are those actually showing up in recognition moments? Are they falling flat in certain pockets of the business? Are they coming to life in others? Recognition can also be a revealer of the skills that people are demonstrating over time and readiness for promotion, who can be a good mentor for a colleague, right? There's all these words that people are using to describe those moments, and that if you mine that with AI in an intentional way, you can really generate some really powerful insights.
Interesting. Maybe let's back up a minute, and can you just define how you use the term recognition? Because there might be some in the audience that aren't as familiar.
It's a great question. In our world, recognition is really the opportunity to have a thoughtful, deliberate pause, and you empower people with a tool that says, anybody can recognize anybody. So a peer, maybe in the front lines, seeing something important unfolding, maybe it's a safety-related core value. It's taking a moment to capture the essence of what was observed, how it was reinforcing the safety culture, who did what, how much time did it take, the level of initiative. All of those elements get captured, and in our tool, we actually, it's not just a good job, high five with 2 or 3 words. We actually have coaching nudges that are scanning the words as you're typing and encouraging more specificity, more detail around impact, so that by the end of it, there's a healthy paragraph there that can really help to memorialize that moment, but then that moment can then land well with the recipient, because they're going to feel that sense of, wow, that mattered what I did, and now I feel seen and heard and appreciated for that important safety behavior. And so it's taking those moments, that's what we deliver at scale, and then what are all the analytics that you can do behind the scenes, but it's one individual recognition moment at a time, as thoughtful as we can help to craft that, and then putting it into a system of record.
Wow, interesting. And then, so for you and at Cigna, how does AI kind of fit into these conversations there? Because this is AI is reshaping everything, and so interesting to talk about, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when we talk about, emerging technologies generally, and think about how they tie to something like, recognition, there's so many creative ways that you can think about that. I think your overview was really helpful, right, when you talk about the coaching moment. So yes, it's important to say thank you. And in Omar's remarks, right, just underscoring both say thank you for hard work, thank you for something project specific, but also thank you for showing up in a way that reinforces the behavioral norms we like to see, right? So when you talk about recognition, I think it's that full continuum of all of the ways in which we want to elevate certain behaviors, right? Like fostering those is super important. And then tying them with those coaching moments. So whether you use a software or even something I've used, right? Like just asking, AI, like if all of my team took the same assessment, right? We all did DISC, we all did Myers-Briggs or whatever they change the name to, right? But like I have these types on my team, we're being thoughtful about how can we have a conversation about how we can work well together, knowing that we have these different styles. What can I do, right? And then in a relatively short period of time, you have a conversation. So one really concrete example is, I think, I have a couple of AI tools that help me to think through a conversation I'm going to have with my team in a couple weeks. And what I want to reinforce is kind of proactive ownership. I think many of us are, dealing with companies that are in, changing its transformational moment. at this time, right, you're thinking about how can I empower people to be proactive without me in the room. And I was able to use AI to help me think through how can I not only broach the subject without someone feeling like I'm attacking them for not being proactive enough, but also do some real exercises. What can we, it's not just a conversation, right? Like how can I design it for what we do? Here is our strategy. What is some real world conversation we could have around it?
Interesting. So using AI to generate prompts that then you're going to use in the conversation. Mm-hmm.
I think just to add on to that, I think you can definitely also leverage AI to be able to synthesize all the information, especially if you're using a technology or pulse surveys, you're gathering a lot of insights. Depending on the size of your organization, if you've got 5,000 workers, how are you going to be able to analyze that information and really be able to see trends? Well, AI is a really great way to be able to synthesize all that information and that data to be able to then work with managers to have those conversations to help improve safety or some particular value that you want to increase more of. So I think it's a great way to again, use that as a way to scale recognition, values, and those kinds of important elements that you might not be able to see if it's just you yourself, one team, across, again, especially in the workforce that might be more hybrid or frontline based. If you're not in the room on for third shift, middle of the night, kind of stuff, how do you make sure that you're able to see what's happening on the ground level and then take action upon that?
Right, so then you could take a survey and then just use AI to distill like a mass survey into really tangible findings to better understand kind of the experience of these frontline workers who aren't necessarily yet in the room with corporate managers. Right. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And I'm sure at Comcast, you're using a lot of technology there as well. So how is AI changing kind of the work you do?
Yeah, I tell people that this is the era where we can finally achieve working smarter, not harder, literally. And so it's constantly changing the ways in which and how we work. I think it also changes simply the areas of development for people that we have in our organizations. A long time we focused on the technical skills, and reality is that with AI, and I'll just drop a book too, The AI-Driven Leader, the focus needs to be not only on the technical skills or the AI enabling skills, but it needs to be on human skills. And how do you double down more on being human? How to lead with being human? I constantly remind people of a quote that Brene Brown said, which is, clarity is kindness. And so for me, it is constantly, how do I help leaders have the empathy and the understanding and the skills using AI to be able to be that leader that everybody wants to follow?
Huh, interesting. Speaking of kindness and character, we're living in a really charged political environment. And over the past couple years, there was an idea of bringing your whole authentic self to work. There's a lot of conversation about inclusion and those values. Now the political culture is changing. How are you grappling with that, and how is that changing the way you talk about a company culture?
I can start us off. Yeah, we still have a strong point of view at WorkHuman that we want to encourage bringing your whole self to work. There's that element of your engagement goes up significantly if you're not just that worker, right? That shows up and delivers what it said to deliver in your job description. Mm-hmm. And so we create experiences that can be cataloged in our platform around life events, getting a house, getting married, adopting a puppy. Those types of things can be celebrated at scale. You can also do ERG-related activities, Habitat for Humanity, community service events. Those are all part of not just focusing on people living their core values, but also what are they doing outside of work as a whole human. And we also have some tools that we're kind of staying true to, even though, like you said, the political climate is changing as it relates to inclusion. And we have tools that scan the message that somebody might be writing as they're nominating to make sure that there's no microaggressions or gendered language or different things that could be triggering, because at the end of the day, these moments are designed to lift people up. And if for whatever reason you say, hey guys, but you're recognizing a team of guys and girls, it may land flat. Or if you're talking about poor work-life balance, I know I could count on you to always come in at the 11th hour and save the day. You're recognizing and being positive and saying, hey, I really appreciate what you did, but you're also reinforcing certain things that are not healthy in the workplace. So those are the kind of things we call Inclusion Advisor. It's designed to offer those micro adjustments before you hit send on that
Wow,
message.
so that's AI built into the like the email tool or the
nomination
browser.
tool. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then it's kind of scanning your content and
Well,
suggesting, wow.
And if I could piggyback, one thing I think important Martel pointed out, right, is the human aspect of it that AI can't duplicate. And one, I think, aspect of humanity to be thoughtful about is even when we say bring your whole self to work, that means very different things to different people. One thing I would mention, so recently we published a white paper on what vitality means in a multi-generational workforce. And of course, there might be certain generalizations about, generations that are showing up in our workforce, but we have probably 6, almost 7, right, generations in our workforce. Depending on the size of your company, you might have 5 or 6 at the same time easily. And being able to lead groups with very different expectations can be very challenging. And what we found is even when you talk about vitality, right, which everyone would say, yes, in order for me to feel well, I do want to feel like I could bring my whole self to work. But there were very different ways in which people thought that was, something valuable to them. So we found that there were certain groups, bring your whole self to work really just means I'm expecting direct and honest feedback from my manager. It means that, if I have to take time off, I could just say I have a meeting and people respect that boundary. Whereas we found there were other groups, in this case, probably like skewed a little younger, it wasn't just a direct and honest, it was a level of authenticity that was expected, which is very different, right? Or they didn't want to just say they had a meeting. They wanted to say, I need to go take my dog to the vet, right? And so you are asking even your people managers, you need to be respectful and understand what we mean by bring your whole self to work shows up differently. It's the same value, but what people need from you is different. So where can we help support you in respecting boundaries versus where you need to embrace, more details about someone's personal life, because some of those disconnects creates cognitive dissonance, where it might feel frustrating if your expectations don't match your teams or your coworkers, when really we are kind of after the same thing as humans, but how that shows up can be very different.
Yeah, that is a great point. I think that there are vast generational differences in the workplace, and just different languages.
Yeah, and to that point, right, some of them are, I've always asked, is it, I think, people say, just to using this as an example, millennials care about work-life balance. And do they care about it because they're a millennial, or do they care about it because they're in their 40s and 30s and they're caregivers for their parents and children or nieces and nephews, right? Like, is it because of something specific to the generation or just the stage of life they're in? It could be both. It probably is both, right? But the way that shows up, and to that point, clarity is kindness. If you're clear, right, about why they need it, what's driving it, then you can be a lot more empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. Angie, do you have any thoughts on that?
I can wholeheartedly agree, but I also think, a big part of that is being able to be transparent as well. So not just accepting and understanding, but like when there is friction or things going wrong, being able to be transparent as an individual contributor or worker to say, hey, this is where I'm finding things are challenging, and having that comfort level with the organization, with their managers, to be able to say that out loud, and then actually being able to take action on that as well. So, and if things maybe can't be changed, at least having that ability to be heard, and at least some sort of something to take action on, even if it isn't a direct resolution on that. I think that's part of, as someone who is coming to work every day, needs to feel like their voice is heard. So kind of having that ability to be transparent and share that communication, I think, is really important to feeling like I'm living the corporate values as well.
And part of that, at least over the past decade or so, living company values has been about giving back to the community, doing community work, coming together as a corporation. I think some of you even talked about this, to organize days of service. Is that still something that you're seeing interest in?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think most human beings want to pursue something that's higher than themselves. Essentially, it also helps give a person a sense of purpose, which also gives them a sense of belonging, which makes a community, which is why we have employees that thrive. I mean, it's all connected there. So I definitely see employees still signing up for what we call Team Up, which are the volunteer opportunities, and it's coming together with your fellow employees to make things happen in your community, in the communities in which we live and work in, and we want them to thrive too. I think those are very big opportunities. I would also say this too, as a leadership team, we always try to create those moments that matter, is what we call them essentially. So it's how do we be intentional about bringing people together, whether it is for the community or if it is something internally, but it's always those moments that we're trying to create that help people to thrive and to grow and to build together.
I have an example actually of how we have some customers in the North Carolina, the Carolinas areas, who use our product. Obviously, that employee hub experience to bring communications, productivity together in one place for them. But last year, for example, with the Hurricane Helene, when that impacted their communities, they actually used our platform to be able to reach out to their fellow coworkers, to check in on them, to organize, self-organize, volunteer cleanup crews and fundraising opportunities within the platform. So again, kind of bringing that community element to work, I think, was really, really important with them. And they already had a solution where they could do that already with just work. And now that was bringing in their community that they could share more broadly. And I think that was a really great way to show, how much they care for their coworkers, even though, they're just people that you would think that, we just spend 8 hours a day with them or whatever it is for a shift. They bring that element of that humanness to the workforce as well.
Mm-hmm. And now at Beekeeper internally, do you find opportunities to do days of service there? Have you seen, are people still interested, even though, I think at least, I work in the news, and the news is exhausting right now, right? Like, it is tiring. People, I'm seeing my friends saying, why don't you just tell me in like a text what the news is? Because I don't want to look at it. So people are kind of like tuning out of the world. Do you see employees still want to give back?
I do. I definitely do. And even at Beekeeper ourselves, we have our own ERGs and communities where there might be some shared interests. People volunteer all the time, and they share, again, how they're giving back to the community. I see that just about almost every day. And again, I think it's a great way for people to feel connected, again, from outside from just like, here's the corporate goal that we're trying to achieve. This is how I like to spend my time, and I think also give people ideas and ways that they maybe should also step outside of just like their day-to-day realities and put themselves in the shoes of other people as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anything else to add? Well, when we're talking about company culture, are there ways in which that you've seen the company culture kind of evolve in the past couple of years as people are relying more on technology? Are there sort of ways in which there's been positive change that's coming out of that technology? Something I always wonder about, like I know in our organization, we talk so much on Slack, and in some ways it's great because you can tell a joke real quick, you can always sort of be in conversation. In another way, it's not so great because tone is missed. Something that might just be like, yeah, okay, then is okay. You know, it's like you're missing sort of the smile, the expression that comes along with it. So I'm wondering if you guys have any observations about that and what people can do when they're working in using technology to kind of abate that.
Maybe I'll build off what you said. I think the emojis are helpful, right, to
Yeah.
convey. But yeah, I think it's a mix, right? During COVID, we all went back and did a lot of remote work for those of us that could, that didn't have to keep the lights on in the business we were in. And so Zoom was a thing, and we'd try to get through all of that by staying close through frequent touch points as a team. But now that we're through all of that, people are more willing to travel. Having those face-to-face moments are still going to be important. So that way, when you do have to kind of get back to that hybrid, you can still read between the lines and not take the wrong tone because that person tends to joke a little bit more than most, or they've always got that smiley face emoji when they add that comment. But I would say that's kind of what I see the most around. Technology is a great enabler. Steve Jobs famously said, it's the bicycle for the mind, the PC, right? And it helps us to do things a little bit more efficiently than having to do it without digital tools. But digital tools always help. But that you still need to put the human back in the center of it and try to find ways to stay true to the fact that we all have these needs for belonging, and Maslow's hierarchy is still going to be true today and with AI and beyond, whatever comes next.
I think technology companies are also thinking about that user experience at the end of the day. It's like, how are people going to be more engaged to leverage the technology? So if we're talking about, in areas where we want them to be really engaged, and bring forth some of these things, insights to the team, then those tech vendors also are looking at how can I make this easy to use, whether it's bringing in emojis, but also offering those who are administrators of those platforms best practices from other organizations on how they're handling certain topics, especially if there's like touchy subjects. I think as maybe managers or leaders, we might want to control that narrative and not let things get, kind of out of hand. But also having trust in those individuals to again, like be transparent and bring forth some of these things, but also just say, we trust that you're going to use this communications Slack channel, or, our tool in particular, to communicate about work, communicate about this particular subject. And then having the technology also be able to flag if something is, is said that either isn't compliant or, breaks certain rules and regulations. Technology vendors are thinking about those kinds of things, and whether it's through AI or just built into the platform, they're bringing that to the table.
And I guess you use at Martell at Comcast, you're using technology to tell stories in many different ways. Can you talk about how within the company you're using storytelling to uplift employee experience?
Yeah, it's partly using the storytelling to connect us all together. I constantly remind people that all of us make a choice every day on coming to the place to work where we've decided to work. That's a choice, right? I know we're all saying we got bills and responsibilities, but it is still a choice that you get up out of your bed to do that. And so for me, it is, how do I continue to reinforce the values that really matter to us as a company? We have what we call Comcast leader behaviors for everyone. And again, I do that by reinforcing it positively through storytelling. Just today, we released the latest employee story and we have a theme because I'm in the Beltway region, which covers about 6 states, including DC. And we call it Beltway, essentially. It's a sort of a theme we have our employees rally around in our region. And one of those things we do is we've been highlighting employees that have been doing exceptional customer service work, essentially, regardless of what function they're in. And we've been highlighting them in stories so that other people can gravitate to those same behaviors or understand or cheer for their peers. Another storytelling series that we're actually doing right now as well is Beltway on the Move. So one of the things what we wanted to do is, as we're upskilling and reskilling people, we wanted people also to be able to see actual examples of other people cross functions to get other opportunities. Because organizations are becoming more and more flat, right? So it becomes this whole thing on, how do I find opportunities that could be a lateral move? Or how do I find opportunities that may be in a different function? Maybe I'm in HR today, but tomorrow I might be in finance. I would love to see an example of that. And so we started doing Beltway on the Move, where we can show a person that's been in retail, now maybe in Comcast business sales, or maybe someone that was in retail will do finance or what have you. And so we try to do that where we rally people around stories. The other thing too, in relation to stories is that, reality is that all of us love, I was going to say gossip, but I really don't like gossip. But all of us love personal details, I'll say. We all love the story, essentially. And so people gravitate to when you show them photos of someone in their professional or personal life that they add to these things. Again, it's something that, for me, it's how do I weave in the commonalities to show that we're more alike than not alike. And that, to me, creates a healthy culture.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have you know that there was this podcast that I think it was called Normal Gossip. I haven't listened to it in a very long time, but the underlying premise of it is that gossip is good and that you like it for a reason, and the reason is that gossip is actually kind of a societal protection tool to keep us all aware of like potential risks, dangers, and just sort of knowledge of self. And so, protective tool of gossip. So, and that's
very interesting. Now, I will tell you, I was a fan, and don't laugh too much, of the series Gossip Girls, and I don't think it taught me that.
That's it. I mean, another great show. The reboot.
It was a great show.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
The great normalizer.
Yes.
Like, oh, there's others out there who are better or worse than me.
Right, exactly.
Maybe I'll build on that. Just the way that you tell stories, clearly in recognition, those are full of rich detail and their story. But something we added to our product recently is taking that to completion. So you might earn some points for recognition, and you go to your catalog to redeem maybe a gift card, physical item merchandise. But then being able to tell that story back to the person who nominated you, or to your work circle, your network of colleagues, to say, hey, thanks for taking the time to recognize me. I'm going on a trip with my family to Disney. I use some of my points to get a gift card to have this excursion, whatever it is, right? So it's that kind of storytelling that also reinforces the good, and it brings that full circle back to that living your core values, living your culture, but then here's what I'm doing with that, and here's a little bit about my personal life that I'm willing to share. People buy running shoes, and you learn about them being a runner through that, or gift cards at Lowe's, and they're building a shed for their dad who is a tinkerer. Like, you learn so many cool things about your fellow colleagues through those stories.
Right. And people do find meaning in other people.
Yeah.
And that's something that's essential here. So we only have a couple of minutes left. And so I want to close out and just have each of you on the panel answer one question. And that is a question itself. What's one question that the HR leaders in the audience should ask themselves about their corporate culture and how it could be improved in a positive way?
Yeah, I would say one question that I would encourage all of us to be asking is, did I create space for someone? I think that there is an aspect of being human in this concept of creating safe space for people just to be whatever that is. And so that's something I ask myself at the end of each day.
Yeah, I think for me, it would be just, how do we bring the culture off the walls, and how do we make it something that people can find their voice in and give them a voice to celebrate others?
I think for me, I would ask myself, how am I leveraging my middle managers to the best of their ability, and empowering them to also be able to bring culture off the walls or out of the slide deck and actually into the day-to-day realities of the workers.
And I would say, for me, every day I ask myself, how am I helping the folks that are in my remit to thrive? And thriving can look different for each person, but for me it is, are the actions or the things that I'm doing, is it helping and setting up people to thrive?
Those are all important points. We have about 20 seconds. So I'm going to ask, does anyone in the room have one question to close out this panel? Not even a question about Gossip Girl? Wow.
We have one
Okay.
right in the middle.
Oh, we have one. Okay, yes.
In your experience, what do you think, what is some common mistakes you feel like companies make when it comes to culture?
Common mistakes when it
And
comes to
yeah,
culture.
just to repeat it, that the person asked if there are what are some common mistakes in building culture, correct? Thank you.
Should we go down the line? Or
Yeah, let's go down the line. Let's make it quick. It's a
Yeah,
fast
I would say from my perspective, it's designing the culture in the glass tower without actually letting the culture show up organically and then figuring out how you can support it.
I was going to say the same. Put people in the center, right? Humans have to be at the center of your culture, and that will allow the culture to breathe.
I would say that it is enforcing culture to happen rather than letting it happen organically and learning from it and then building your culture from that.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is, one, I think everyone needs to be intentional about the positive things that they want to have in their culture and to actually amplify that. And two, to make sure that you're building your culture that is inclusive, meaning that it brings everybody along with you.
Thank you so much. I hope that this was meaningful to you guys. Have a wonderful afternoon.